Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRNAM for Monday, July 17th, 2023. And our top story today, the Department of Labor launches a workship ownership initiative that was in Secure 2.0. And joining me now to discuss this and a lot more, Austin Ramsey is with Bloomberg Law. Austin, great to see you again. Thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Austin, the Department of Labor recently announced it's going to launch a worker ownership initiative mandated in Secure 2.0. First of all, what is this initiative and what's the time frame around launching it?
Yeah, that's right. So the Department of Labor says that they are ready to get started on this as soon as possible. They have already hired an interim director of this initiative. It's a new division in the Department of Labor's Employee Benefit Security Administration. And what this does ultimately is work with companies and work with state level initiatives that are intended to help the setup and importantly covering the costs of establishing what are called employee stock ownership plans. And these are essentially what you know of as employee-owned companies. Whenever you see a company that is employee-owned, it's almost always an employee stock ownership plan. The way these work is, either entirely or a part of a company's stock. It's the shares in its private or public arena are distributed to the participants, the actual workers in the plan. And as they continue to give service to the company, they accrue more of the stock. And it's a way to save for retirement, just the same way as you would in a 401k plan or an old style defined benefit pension plan.
So why is this so groundbreaking? I know there's been a little bit of a tenuous relationship, as there often is, between the Congress and the executive branch, in this case, the Department of Labor. But why is this so groundbreaking?
Well, it's groundbreaking for a couple of reasons. First of all, Congress is requiring the Department of Labor to do this. As many of your viewers know, Congress passed the Secure 2.0 Act late last year, which was a landmark bill that had a number of important workplace retirement provisions in it. Among them was this plan to incentivize employee-owned companies around the country. And I think it's important to note that it seems a little odd that the Department of Labor, whose regulatory controls extend pretty much only into companies for their retirement plans, it seems odd that they would have this regulatory control over the development of employee-owned companies. But Congress views these as a retirement benefit, essentially. When you are distributing stock from a closely held group of people, the owners of the company, to the workers themselves, they view that as an important and importantly a democratic way of saving for retirement. It gives workers a stake in the labor that they're putting into the company. But the Labor Department over the last few decades, really 15 to 20 years, has had a really antagonistic view of these employee stock ownership plans, commonly referred to as ESOPs. The reason for that, we don't really know. But what we do know is that the Department of Labor has been investigating and then litigating these plans to a point that it's had almost a scorched earth effect on the industry that supports ESOPs in the U.S.
Yeah, and an employee stock ownership plan typically, and I want to get your feedback on this, Austin. Last question, by the way, before we go to a commercial break, is typically within ESOP, you get an opportunity as an employee, and I've been a part of organizations that do this, where you can buy shares in a company. And you, again, unlike a mutual fund, you have to buy whole shares. So you're not buying fractional shares. You're buying, like you would in a mutual fund, you buy whole shares. And then sometimes a organization will match, or you'll get, for every $1 you put in towards a share, you'll get something back in return. And then there can be vesting provisions, and maybe that's a little bit too into the weeds, but that's the way these programs work. And as you said, it allows employees to own equity. Now, they probably don't have a controlling shares in the sense that they own a majority of shares, but still, what the net result is, they get appreciation if the stock goes up as a result of their work, productivity, and labor. They're seeing a benefit from this.
That's absolutely right. And as you know, there are a number of different ways that these ESOP plans can be set up. But what's important to know about the Department of Labor's regulatory treatment of these plans is the valuation of those shares when they transfer from a small group of people, the original owners of the company, to the workers themselves. We usually refer to this as overall stock valuation. And in a publicly traded company, that's a pretty simple thing because it's on a public stock exchange. And so it's a set price established by all of the shareholders in the stock. But when you have a privately held, closely held company, like, a company that's not on a public stock exchange, it's a little bit more difficult to value those total assets. And the Department of Labor historically has almost always considered the valuation set price as inflated. And they look at that as a net, benefit for the original owners of the company, and a subtraction from the new owners being the workers at the company themselves. And it's also important to note that the Department of Labor has been pushing in many of the settlement agreements that they've had with these companies for more control from the workers. You noted how, this may not be, the same kind of ownership that you would see in a majority share price holder. But in fact, the Labor Department has been looking for exactly those kinds of provisions when they settle with companies out of court.
Yeah. Austin, as I said, I need to take a very quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about investor education. This is a really important part of ESOPs. You're going to want to stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Imagine a new television network that will make you richer, healthier, and in control of your financial future. This network is for the policewoman in Nashville, Tennessee, the baker in Dubuque, Iowa, the teacher in Lexington, Kentucky. We want to make the idea of savings and retirement culturally relevant. But what do you see as a defining issue of the midterms, especially for the smaller businesses? I mean, they are the lifeblood of the American economy. Featuring exclusive interviews, current affairs, and docuseries. 33 years old, you retired early.
The philosophy is money only matters if it helps you live a life that you love.
But you got to start thinking about retirement as soon as you get in.
The Broadcast Retirement Network will drive very high engagement with premium partnerships. So this isn't retirement and savings for your parents or grandparents. This is for all Americans. And we're going to change the way you think about money. Welcome to the next frontier of retirement and savings. This is BRN, the Broadcast Retirement Network.
Tax audits, tax liens, wage garnishments.
Every day we hear stories like this about good folks who are simply struggling to pay their bills. Each of them are living a frightening IRS tax nightmare, and they are afraid it will destroy their lives.
I'm a divorced single mom, and my ex-husband left me and the kids with a lot of unpaid bills, including unpaid taxes. I was really starting to show my stress on my kids because the IRS had sent me a letter demanding a huge payment from me. I couldn't afford it. So then the IRS was threatening to garnish my wages. I'm already living paycheck to paycheck. That would have put me over the edge financially.
It truly seemed hopeless, but then a friend at work told her to call the tax relief line.
The people at the tax relief line They told me about something called innocent spouse relief. They worked it out so that all of the taxes from my ex are not my problem. I don't know how that works, and I don't care. All I care about is that I don't owe the IRS a dime, and they are not going to take my paycheck.
Even if it seems hopeless, you should call the number on your screen right now. There is absolutely no cost for the call or the consultation. You are under no obligation. If you are worried that the IRS could garnish your wages, seize your assets, even take your home, call us right now. The Tax Relief Line is here to help you. Now you have a knowledgeable, professional team of tax experts that are ready to negotiate with the IRS and fight for you to save you money. The Tax Relief Line's professionals have successfully negotiated thousands of cases, reducing and sometimes even eliminating the tax debt for their clients. It's very easy to get started. Simply call the number on your screen right now. You don't have to live in fear anymore. The call and the consultation are free.
Austin, thanks so much for staying with us. Really appreciate you hanging around for segment number 2 this morning.
Fun conversation. Thanks.
It is a fun conversation and an important conversation. There are some differences as we talked about, and we're not going to get into all the framing, all the details here, but there's an educational element to what the Department of Labor is doing too, right? I mean, they for a lot of what the Department of Labor does, whether it's enforcement of health and welfare plans, things you need to know, they're always accessible. The general public can call them up and offer complaints. They can ask for education. But there's going to be some education around what ESOPs are and what they do as well.
That's right. As the Department of Labor, required by Congress now, works to establish more ESOPs around the country, there are going to be more workers who have saved for retirement traditionally through a 401k plan or something like that, who are going to be also given the opportunity to have a real stake in the company that they're working for. But it's important because, we're talking about all of these acronyms like ESOPs and employee stock. And I mean, this can get really complicated for workers. And you're right. One of a really important role that DOL's Employee Benefit Security Administration serves is being a sounding board for workers. I mean, there are numbers, there are ways, that workers can reach out directly to the Department of Labor without establishing a complaint, really without having anything wrong. They can just call the Department of Labor up, the Employee Benefit Security Administration, and ask them about the benefits that they're owed. You can review plan documents that your employer is giving you with EBSA, the Employee Benefit Security Administration, and they can walk you through what those benefits mean. And that is critically important because although ESOPs are a good thing ultimately, if employee stock goes down, as you noted, when it goes up, when your hard work goes well, if it goes down, this is money that you are owed at retirement. When you leave the company, this is going to turn into cold hard cash, if you will. And you want to ensure that you're doing everything that you can to maximize those benefits.
Yeah. And we talked about this in the first segment, but when I think of the difference between stock and a mutual fund, as an example, we talked about fractional shares versus whole shares. That's an important concept. But also, and you just hit it, that stock prices go up, stock prices can go down. Unfortunately, it's not a zero-sum game here. They go up, they go down. There's fluctuation. People need to really understand maybe some of the differences. Also, Austin, they trade differently. Stocks trade throughout the day from 9:30 to 4 o'clock. Mutual funds trade throughout the day, but there's one NAV strike price that gets figured out at the end of the day.
That's absolutely right. At the end of the day, we're talking about individual shares in a company. Now, if we're talking about a privately held company, maybe these aren't being shared publicly the same way that a public stock is. That said, ESOPs can be publicly traded companies, your Microsofts of the world, for example. And yes, when you are absorbing shares of this company, you are in the stock market the same way that you are in a 401k plan with a mutual fund. The difference is that the trader behind those individual shares is you. not some investment manager on Wall Street. And so if you are going to play the game, you need to understand the rules.
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. You need to understand how, especially in a privately held company. So forgetting in a publicly traded company, there's a lot of documentation, there's analyst reports, but in a privately held company, you want to understand the valuation, how they're going to do that. Look, the key reason for offering stock to the general public or to workers is it's a capital raising mechanism. It's a way to infuse an organization with, for exchange of ownership, you get the ability as a company to get more capital in to do things like capital improvements, infrastructure, all the things that you need. So it generally is a win-win situation, but it's really important in these privately held companies to understand, first of all, when's the valuation going to be done? It could be done annually. It could be done semi-annually. It may not be done daily. A lot of times that's done by an outside auditing firm or financial services firm.
That's absolutely right. And I think a really important note to emphasize here is this capital realization, the idea of improving the capital position of the company itself. When a small group of owners chooses to form an ESOP, they're doing this, sure, to give their workers a stake in their company, but they're also doing it to make money. And that's where the valuation of that original stock purchase becomes so incredibly important. The Department of Labor, as I've noted, they tend to think that it's a little bit inflated. But at the end of the day, this money can be turned back into the company to expand, to purchase new resources. It's an important part of capital gain for the company itself. Congress, when they established ESOPs all the way back in the 1970s, they knew that. They designed ESOPs as a win-win for the original owners of the company to invest back in the company and for the workers to get a stake in the company. But they didn't know who to regulate it. They didn't know where they would put it. They thought, well, maybe the IRS, maybe the SEC. They landed with the Department of Labor because the DOL, as I noted earlier, they regulate employee benefits, and this is a worker benefit. But the result of that has been a really antagonistic relationship. Now the DOL is being forced by Congress to turn face, and I think Congress hopes we're going to see more ESOPs in this country very soon.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see the reporting that comes back to the Congress from the Department of Labor. You know, there's always this tenuous relationship between all the branches. I mean, it's just, look, it's the nature of a republic that we're in. Austin Ramsey, great to see you as always. Look, that was a great conversation. We need to do more shows on ESOPs now. Great to see you. Thanks for joining us. We look forward to having you back on the program again very soon.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
That wraps up this episode of BRNAM. Have a topic of interest, somebody you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news and lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, and all in one place, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content, visit our website, and of course, all of our streaming partners. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRNAM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes. Now is your opportunity to co-create content around any topic on the First Lifestyle and Wellness Network. Reach a global audience through our platform and co-own exclusive branded content. All of our programs are available on demand and also as audio-only podcasts, so you can take us on the go. Broadcast Retirement Network, available anytime, anywhere, and on any device.